You've got customers, revenue, a team, proof that the product you built actually works. So why is everything getting harder? In this video, I'm going to show you the 2 mountains every founder has to climb, why the operating system that built your startup will actively work against you on the second mountain, and the 5 dimensions every founder has to consciously shift before the second mountain becomes possible. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Racz. 15 years as a co-founder and chief operating officer, scaling high growth companies from 10 to 250 people, doing 15 million a month in revenue. Now I help founders prepare themselves and their companies to scale beyond a startup. When I co-founded my first startup, I was 21 and fresh out of college. And while I had an immense amount of passion and belief in myself, I honestly had very little prior experience actually launching and building a company with real revenue, a real team, and real responsibility as a leader. But by the end of my second startup, where we hit hyperbolic growth, doing 15 million a month in only 2 years and still faced a hard collapse, I had this aha moment that felt like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. My original understanding and worldview of scaling a business was the analogy that you scale one single mountain with objectives and milestones along the way to the summit. What I realized is that there are actually 2 completely different mountains every founder has to climb in their business. And when you get to the top of the first, the second mountain is far off in the distance, it's 10 times bigger, and there is terrain in between the 2 mountains that you need to navigate just to get to the base of the second mountain. It's that middle terrain where most founders struggle the most. They never even get the chance to climb the second mountain because they don't know they're even in it. This shift in perspective completely changed how I approach building businesses because it provides a more accurate map of where you are, where you're trying to go, and how to actually get there. Every founder's journey evolves through 2 primary phases: the startup phase and the scale-up phase. I call this scaling the 2 mountains. The first mountain is the startup phase, where the peak, the primary objective, is achieving product market fit. Most founders relate to this phase as being in hustle mode or survival mode. You're basically putting in a lot of effort to build the product, to sell it to early adopters, and to get them to use it over and over again. The second mountain is the scale-up phase. It's what you're building toward once the concept is proven, when the company actually works. It requires coordinated leadership and clear reporting structures. It requires an operating cadence the whole team can sync to, and systems that hold their own when the founder isn't present. And it can sound like a dream if you're still in the startup phase. I can tell you what the second mountain actually looks and feels like because I experienced it from the inside. After my first company got acquired, I spent the next 2 years inside a real scale-up, an ed tech SaaS company that was doing 40 million a year in revenue that eventually sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. And everything about their scale-up was the complete opposite of our startup. They ran bi-weekly all-hands meetings using the exact same format every single time. Every major department had a leader who owned it, and every team member had a clear role and reporting line. The CEO was spending most of his time on keynotes and partnerships, acquisitions, industry presence, rather than being in the day-to-day. And my honest reaction was that the scale-up phase, it felt corporate, it felt repetitive and even boring. It took me a while to adapt and ultimately understand that the boring was exactly what made it possible to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars when they finally exited. So there is this massive shift that needs to take place between the 2 mountains. The second mountain is rhythmic, it's structured, and it's built to run without the founder holding it together by sheer force or being in the trenches on everything. And that's the destination. That's what we're working toward. What I want to highlight is that the operating system that you're running that got you up the first mountain will not get you up the second. And since nobody really explains this, most founders reach the peak of the first mountain and they keep climbing, they keep sprinting with the same instincts, the same pace, the same identity, only to find themselves on completely different terrain. And that operating system, it runs on 5 different dimensions, and every single one of them has to change when you're ready to shift into scale-up mode of your business. Those 5 dimensions are identity, focus, roles, pace, and decisions. I'm going to walk you through each one of these, and we'll start with the hardest one, identity. On the first mountain, you wear the identity of a startup founder. You are the one in the trenches doing most of the work alongside your team. You're putting out most of the fires. You're leading most, if not all, of the meetings. And pretty much every decision has to route through you. This is why the term founder heroics was coined. because most founders are still the ones the company relies on in order to survive the toughest moments up the first mountain. The problem is that by the time you hit product market fit, this is what gets programmed into you. It gives you a sense of value, a sense of identity, a sense of meaning. A lot of founders quite literally fuse their identity with the startup. Their nervous systems, they get addicted to the survival mode. This is where they learn that they get rewarded for their hustle, that speed and intensity are how you win, and that stepping back means falling behind. On the second mountain, that identity needs to shift from startup founder to scale-up leader. The founder who still does everything can't build and lead the team that scales without them. What matters is how well you've built the people and the systems that can execute without you in every meeting or involved in every final decision. You're the same person with the same title, but there is a completely different definition of who you need to be at this stage. And that old identity, it doesn't evolve easily or quietly, and that's what makes this the hardest dimension to shift. The second dimension is focus. On the first mountain, the focus is clear: get to product market fit. Nothing else really matters until you've answered whether the concept actually works. And every day is an experiment, it's a battle. But on the second mountain, that question has been answered. The new question is whether what you built can now compound. Can it scale without breaking? Can you build the operating discipline, the culture, the infrastructure to grow something that lasts beyond the founder being the business? Founders who don't make that shift consciously, they keep searching for things to prove long after they have their proof. They stay in startup mode when what the company actually needs is scale-up mode. The third dimension is roles. On the first mountain, everyone does everything. You've got fluid roles where each team member may have a title, but they're doing the work of three. And this is a big advantage, right? Small teams covering a lot of ground because survival requires it. More often than not, as a startup, you attract early team members who are looking for non-traditional roles. They are looking to get hands-on experience that they've been craving, to be part of something that actually has soul. They're willing to take less pay for the freedom and opportunity. But on the second mountain, that same fluidity that was an advantage, it starts creating friction and burnout, fragmentation. As the team grows, people need to know exactly what they own, and they need to be free to be excellent in their role without expecting them to cover gaps that aren't theirs to fill. The informality that built the startup, it begins actively working against the scale up. In a very real way, this is dimension one, identity, shifting across most team members in the company at the exact same time. Done poorly or sloppily, this burns your culture, it can erode some of your closest relationships, but done intentionally and collaboratively, you can unify your team and you can lead the shift collectively. The fourth dimension is pace. On the first mountain, speed is one of the primary competitive advantages that keeps the lights on. Startups and their founders are oftentimes praised for being scrappy, moving fast on incomplete information, hustling those long hours. In both of my companies, it was almost like a badge of honor if you responded to a Slack message after 10 p.m., if you shot off emails after 2 a.m., or used weekends to push projects forward. That pace can become addicting. It gives you a ton of dopamine hits. It feels like the company is quite literally jacked up on caffeine 24/7. But on the second mountain, that same pace produces more friction than progress. In a scale up, complexity multiplies, and moving at startup pace will only scale chaos. What the scale-up actually requires is a predictable rhythm, consistent operating cadences, weekly rituals the team can actually count on with quarterly planning that everyone can prepare for. It's that boring rhythm and structure that creates sustainable growth through consistency. And I'll be honest about something. When I experienced this from inside that scale-up, I found the rhythm almost unbearable at first. I equated predictability with mediocrity. Part of me was actually addicted to the urgency, the chaos, the pivots, the feeling of moving at full speed. Those structured meetings that ran the same format every single time felt like the company was losing its edge. But in hindsight, that was the first mountain talking. It took real self-examination to see that the rhythm I was resisting was exactly the architecture that allowed the company to scale and reach its full potential and get to where it was ultimately trying to go. And the fifth dimension is decisions. On the first mountain, decisions are primarily centralized and instinctive. You're able to make calls in real time with whatever information is available because waiting for perfect information can kill your startup. You move fast and you trust your gut. But on the second mountain, every decision that routes through you is a decision the team couldn't make without you. A company that can't make good decisions when the founder isn't in the room or on the Zoom meeting can only scale as far as the founder's bandwidth allows. In a scale up, as complexity grows and as the team grows, if you're still leading as a startup founder instead of a scale up leader, you'll collapse into founder fatigue, into founder depression, like I did on multiple occasions, and your team will begin to resent you and lose trust in you because centralized decision-making is no longer what the company requires of you on the second mountain. Learning to let go of it is one of the core responsibilities of second mountain leadership, and it's something you ultimately build deliberately over time. Every founder fights to earn the chance to climb both mountains, to make the shift between those 5 dimensions. That's the map I wish I visually understood in my head when I was leading my first 2 companies. Knowing the terrain exists is one thing. Most founders hit the space between these 2 mountains, the scale-up threshold, without any of this prior knowledge. So their move is to work harder, to push harder, but the scale-up threshold doesn't respond to the same strategy the first mountain rewarded. That's what the next video is all about, how to ensure you don't get trapped in the terrain between the 2 mountains. If this video landed for you, please subscribe. And if you know a founder who just hit product market fit and is starting to feel the friction, send this video to them before they start pushing harder in the wrong direction.